and I am here with my handsome, or should I say heavenly handsome co-host, Dr. Paul Dyer. And if you guys have heard us before, you know why I say that, because it's a running joke among us. And pretty soon we're going to be joined by the devastatingly beautiful Judge Claudia Barber. And we're so happy we have some guests here today. We have Mike Tabor, who has been here before, and we really, really enjoy it when Mike is here. And he has brought Charmaine Peters with him, and we're really, really happy to hear from her as well. The reason why Mike and Charmaine are here is because they live in a county. I don't know if you guys want to talk about which county. You could name it if you want to. They live in a county in Pennsylvania. Mike is mute, okay, where 90% of the people who voted, or 90% of the votes that were cast for Donald Trump. So we wanted to talk about the appeal of Donald Trump and why it is that 90% of a certain county would vote for him, and what those people felt like they were getting from Donald Trump for voting for him, or what they were giving to Donald Trump. Who knows how they interpret it, but I think it's a great idea. And usually we start by talking about other things beside the main topic, and today we could talk about what everybody is talking about, unfortunately, which is it's unfortunate that they have to talk about it, because oh my gosh, it's so sad. We would like to hear your views on what happened in Texas and how much more we could take of this and what we should be doing so that we don't have to talk about things like that in the future. Because in our world, things like that should stop happening. Does anybody want to chime in and talk about how they feel about the shooting in Texas yesterday?
No?
No, Teresa wants to talk.
Okay, go ahead, Teresa.
I'm just devastated. I'm devastated because as a tutor, I deal with half African-American students and half Hispanic students. And this has left a devastation. Now, the powers that be don't want gun control. But I don't think the onus should be on the I think that there should be a fund, just like they send billions of dollars overseas. I don't think that the parents of these children should have any difficulty with all of the arrangements that has to be made. I think that the government should take over that. I don't think that people should have to set up GoFundMes for any of the people who have died. As long as they want to keep guns available, as long as they want to keep the videos that make shooting massive numbers of people. To me, the videos that the children are exposed to, make death and killing massive numbers of people just passe. I just think that when you have all of those freedoms of whatever they are, then you should have a fund set up so that if something happens based on what they don't want to do, then I don't think it should be on the onus of any parent or any of us to take care of what comes after that. I think it should be the government. I don't think that we should pay to GoFundMes or anything like that. They should be the ones paying for all of that. That's how I feel.
So I think that we're saying that they don't want to, the Democrats were saying that they don't want to do a bill because they know that they won't get the 60 votes in the Senate. And I said, do the bill, see who votes for it, and then whoever doesn't vote for it, you could then hold them accountable. When this happens again, you could say, okay, see, you could have prevented this probably. I mean, not 100%, but by not knowing and by not having these people on record, they're sort of anonymous, and it's really hard to figure out who it is that those family members could hold accountable.
So the question we can go around. We don't have to go around and around. Is that, are we looking for someone to blame, or are we accepting ownership because this is happening, will continue to happen, because our community is not a unity. I mean, you can always look at your brother or sister because it's their fault in the household. For whatever reason, mom and dad arguing, it's probably because of something you didn't do to my brother or to my sister. But if we looked at the house as a whole, what could I do, or what could we do to be a better household? And we gotta extrapolate that on a macro level too, because we cannot just talk about. I know people can be against guns or for guns. That's either here or there. They could be against legislation or for legislation. But we are not doing something as a community that is giving the environment to allow this to keep happening, if that makes sense. Because, go ahead.
Well, we'll go back out to the field. We're calling from a rural county farm about another topic. So we could do a brief presentation and then you guys could continue this. But we do have a unique view about Trump, racism, and an examination of what's going on in Trump world that you might not pick up anywhere else. So are you ready, Professor Dyer, to go online with this?
Absolutely.
Okay, so why don't we start? We could do this in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, see what kind of questions there are, and then you could come back to this topic, and we could get back to our farm work. My name is Mike Tabor. I've been on this program before, but during the winter, now I'm in a farmer mode, which is what I've been in for 50 years. And this is Charmaine Peters, our farm manager. So I thought I'd give an overall presentation. And then Charmaine, as a woman of color, would give her impressions of what she's experienced here in the county, Fulton County, Pennsylvania, which has given the largest plurality to Trump in the state of Pennsylvania. Now, let me just ask, is there anyone else attending right now from Fulton County? Because I asked about 10 other people to join us, but I don't know if any of them in the end did. So nobody else. So we'll just give it. I think one by one, even though people they be part of this. One by one, when I said it's going to be a lot of urban people of color, going to be part of a class. I think one by one they decided they didn't want to be on record. So let me give a little bit of background.
And that says a lot, doesn't it?
Well, you were up here on Sunday.
On Sunday, yeah.
We have an annual open farm day for our CSA subscribers and people who come to our farmers markets in Washington. We started one of the first in the city in Adams Morgan 50 years ago, or helped start it. And then one in Brookland, and another one in Anacostia, where we're hosted by the community. And once a year we have an open farm day where people could see how we grow things without chemicals and pesticides. And of the 1,800 people we invited up, you were one of about 60 to come.
And I loved it. They missed out.
Well,
I invite everybody to go next year, hopefully.
Well, we don't know if there's going to be a next year, so we have to see. So let me give you a little bit of a background and then Charmaine's input. So this is one of the most conservative counties in the state. I don't think it voted Democrat since 1863. I'm not even sure why it did back then. Usually, maybe you get a Democrat on the county council, many times not. Now the council, I'm going to say, since there's no one out there to correct me, is dominated by two strong pro-Trump supporters. and one, I guess she's a Democrat, I'm not sure. But, and they're, if you know anything about the politics of Pennsylvania, they're supporters of Mastrano, who I don't know what happened. He might have come in on the top of the Republican rep for governor. He's very right wing, very reactionary. Was part of the January 9th event at the Capitol. My insight is that there's a Trump mythology, and that's all it is. It's a mythology that harkens people back to the good old days that probably never existed. Where neighbor helped neighbor, where there was no such thing as welfare, where people stopped at a corner, will go before them. And Trump evokes that mythical era. And that's the best I could do in determining why a county like this, with really well-meaning, I think pretty decent people. Now, when I say decent, it's understood you don't talk about politics or religion when you're someplace and you bump into somebody. You just don't bring it up, and it's not considered polite in rural communities. So I don't bring it up, and unless they ask me. And the only thing I've noticed over the years, over 50 years farming, is as someone who is overtly Jewish, I've yet to experience anything vaguely anti-Semitic, nowhere near as close as I did in Washington, D.C., when my first wife's parents let me know if we were to marry, it says right here in writing that they could not allow a person of the Jewish persuasion to own their house off River Road, nor a colored maid from staying overnight, nor a person of Asian descent from buying the house. So in some ways, I experienced more racism in Washington, D.C. than I have here. The local vet, Dr. Kaplan, when he was alive, was Jewish, had 2 sons, and over again, they assured me they never came in contact with anti-Semitism. What I've experienced is a lot of anti-Catholicism, So I'm going to stop there unless you got questions later and let Charmaine, who, as I said, has been here for 15 years, has her own insights as what it feels like to be a woman of color in a county that's probably 98% white and 90% Trump.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome, Charmaine.
Thank you. As Mike said, I have been here working at the farm for 15 years, and I came here. My father was in the military, and so I traveled around, and I've been to different places, and so I felt comfortable coming here. I wasn't worried about it too much. I didn't think about it too much because I'd come from Washington, D.C. And I didn't run into any overt, I ran into curiosity more than anything else from the locals. I don't interact a lot socially with the local people. Most of my interactions have to do with, I need tractor supplies or planting supplies or something. So it's business usually, or mushrooms or some other, yes, I need something like that. And people have been very friendly. There's been some curiosity, and there's been some references to me. They'll say, oh, I knew a colored girl once, and that kind of thing. Nothing felt like they were trying to be mean or anything. It was more that they just had very old-fashioned ways of referring to Black people or African Americans. But I will say that I around the time of the Black Lives Matter situation, there was an incident in our town where a group of Black church people came into town and were going to talk about the Black Lives Matter incident, and people here locally got all riled up about it. They thought that we were having a riot going to happen here locally, and they got their guns out and they kind of stood in front of the courthouse with their arms crossed, like we're defending our property and our land from the people. And I was having a conversation with one of the locals about this, and I said, this is a group of church people coming to talk about Black Lives Matter. I don't know why you felt like you had to be threatened by that. And they said, oh no, they were coming to start trouble. And this person said to me, but don't worry, we don't think of you as Black. And and it was eye-opening again for me. And I had to gently remind them that was kind of I know that you intended that to be a compliment, but you trying to compliment me, you were also trying to say that those other people were Black and they were a problem. And I feel that there's not been enough exposure. These people have just not been exposed to Black people or people of color of any type. And they just have this feeling of those people are others. And I think Mr. Trump has made people feel very comfortable with those feelings. He refers to all other races of people as kind of other and those people, and he's not welcoming to everyone. And so I think he makes people feel comfortable with their prejudices. That's kind of my take.
So Charmaine, I'm going to jump right in, and the ultimate question is, and obviously this is more of a perspective, maybe Mike can jump in, is that white people who know this is going on, who say nothing, contribute to the ongoings of the continuous. Do you find that to be true up there, Charmaine, and or Mike?
I will say that I guess I know several people who are outspoken Democrat. We have, in my county, I guess we have 9 or 10,000 conservatives, whatever, compared to maybe less than 2,000 would call themselves liberal or Democratic. And we have an active Democratic group that does, speak out, and they have protests and whatnot. But I think
because this isn't a Democratic issue. It's not a Democratic. It's not a Republican issue. It's a people issue. We have to figure out this is not a party issue. It's about people either saying something or not saying something. And when white people don't say anything, when Black people don't say anything or do anything, they contribute to the factor. So whether it's for or against, if you don't do anything, you become explicit into what's going on. And you're held also liable for what's going on. Because if you do nothing, it stays the same. If you don't say anything, it stays the same. So we got to make sure we focus on people and not parties. Because we get too complacent or confused when we only look at a party and a person. We got to look at people.
Well, okay, let me chime in if I could.
Sure.
I'm pretty outspoken out here.
Right.
And I'm regularly writing op-eds, letters to the editor, regional publications. And actually 2 years ago during Black Lives Matter, the staff approached me and said, Mike, while we're here, understanding most of us are women and probably some might be gay, we would actually appreciate it if you stop writing these things. It puts us in danger. So actually, it was their request. I backed off, and I've started writing things again. This is, it's pretty overt in terms of the white, the strong white, and I would even say pro-Nazi exposure here that you're on the front lines, and I realize that every time I come here, I don't hide my politics. We have had some personal issues when a guy who was dumping sawdust that he was grinding up, he had the choice of taking it here or taking it to the dump. And he called up one of the workers and said, "Your boss," I don't know what he said, "your boss irritated me so much I don't want to dump that sawdust there."
It was chips, wood chips.
Yeah.
It was mulch, and yes, and he read your op-ed in the paper, and he said your boss called us dummies. And
I didn't say dumb.
I know you didn't, but he said he called us dummies, and if I'm one dummy that's not going to drop any wood chips on your lawn anymore. So it was.
I might have called them racist, but I didn't call them dummies.
We have a question.
We're on the front. Dr. Dyer, we're kind of on the front line here, and a lot of. Everyone here seems to have 2 or 3 guns, long-range rifles. As you saw, Marilyn, we're pretty exposed. Anybody who takes offense at something they believe I might have said, all they got to do is sit up on the hill, line up their scope, and there have been incidences in the past where people disagreeing with neighbors have been shot and killed. And I figure, well, look, I've lived a good life. If that actually really does happen, which I would like it not to, I've had it good, and I've spoken up and shown my beliefs. And I know last year we had 3 people come and fix a fence, a large, expensive fence we had put up in the field to keep deer out. And one of them said, "Well, Mike, how do you feel about Trump?" And I said, "Well, you asked me." And I said, "I think he's a con artist. And I think he's a racist." And they were dumbfounded. They didn't believe I said that. And they shook their heads. And someone said, "You got to watch yourself."
Yeah, we'll call you back. Yes.
You got to watch yourself.
John, you have a question. Go ahead, John.
Yes, thank you very much. I have 2 questions because I haven't listened to the conversation. It looks as if we need empathic communication, and that seems to be lacking in many of our discussions. So for Mike and Charmaine, my question, I wanted to know more about your community. What is the demographic? What is the age range? What is the educational quote that you gave of a group of people coming from outside of the same color with you, and yet you are singled out that you are not the same color? They are not referring to color of the skin. They are referring to, they know you and they don't know those other people. And so they regard those people as a threat, but you are not a threat. I think that's my understanding of you are not black. You are not a threat, but they consider them as a threat.
Exactly.
Yeah, you got a point.
Therefore,
we're not. Yeah. Interestingly enough, in Fulton County has kept this population at pretty close at 10, 12,000 in the 50 years I've been here. There's no developments in the county. There's no tract housing. This is a conservative county. A
lot of the people can trace their ancestry back to the 1700s. So it's not a place that has a lot of influx of new or different people. People have been here, and their grandmother and their grandmother's grandmother, that kind of thing.
Thank you very much. So the question is, there needs to be some education.
Well, education is a broad term.
Right.
I don't think the problems we see are going to be solved by education.
No.
I'm not talking of literacy. I'm not talking of book reading or literacy. I'm talking of interaction and understanding.
But here's the thing, and Mike, you're touching on a good point. Here, I want people to know this globally, worldwide. There are always going to be pockets of what Mike Tabor is talking about, whether it be a pocket in a county, whether it be a city, whether it be a corner of a whole state. My problem is, it's not the pockets, it's the leadership that allows this to be okay as a governor, as a senator, as a congressional person, because we living in X part of a state, and this is going on in the other part of the state, it's like, for black people, it's like we need another green book again, just to travel around the United States, which is ridiculous, because we should not have to be like, it's almost like we're hunting or being hunted, which we are. What are the signs we got to look for to make sure that we don't go there? And this is what the others want us to feel like and be like. But I tell you what, me personally and how I feel, I'm never going to feel that way. I'm just not. And I have my own personal reasons of preparedness and training and all that. But that does not speak for my other millions and millions of people should not have to feel like, oh no, did you see that flag? Did you see that sign? Did you see that shop? Did you see that window? I think we should turn around. I can't go there. That's not a place for us to live in. Judge Barbara, I hear you in my heart, girl.
Wow, so much has been said. I think that the discussion about this particular county and the people that live there, I agree with you, Dr. Dyer, that we should not live in fear. We just shouldn't. But then again, though, oftentimes we see in this country, time and time again, there is no equal protection under the law, even though the 14th Amendment is there, just as plain as the nose on your face. You know, people in the workforce are not treated the same. They're not given promotions the same. They're not hired on the same level. You see this disparity that exists. And again, when you go to the neighborhood issue and the community issue, you know, if there are specific places in this country there that if I bought a house there, the housing discrimination is so prevalent that you would not want to live there for fear that people have guns and they will just blow your head off and think nothing of it. They have a wicked mentality, that they could care less that Emmett Till died the way he did because, we're less than human. And it's okay to, in fact, their history has taught us that there was actually a black man in Oklahoma who stood on either the courthouse steps or City Hall inviting black people to vote. And he was shot dead and nobody was ever charged with killing him. So, they want to put the fear of God in you. And it's okay that they stoke these fears in you, that they're better than you, and that, you should watch out for them and you shouldn't cross the line, that type of thing. So all of that is, I haven't seen it, eradicated or eliminated. We currently still exist in a country where a lot of equal protection violations occur on the daily basis.
Absolutely. I think someone had a question or comment. It's iPad 2. Is that correct? I don't know who that person is. Marilyn, do you know?
Oh, that's Mark. Mark, you want to say hi? I love your hat. He's muted.
Greetings, everybody. I am intently listening to the commentary. It's very informative. I appreciate hearing it. My sentiments are pretty much in line with what I'm hearing. In my opinion, it was the day that I first became aware that of the former president came down that escalator. I already knew who he was, having been a resident of New Jersey. And many people, many businesses were hurt by some of the shenanigans and the practices that he would conduct with businesses to basically roll bankruptcy and then turn around, and all the contractors involved with building his buildings or doing work for him would end up getting less than 10% of the dollar on their efforts, so performing work underneath some of his businesses. So I had many friends and family that were impacted by that. So I knew going forward that day that he represented to me the beginnings of a Trojan horse, and what was inside was worse than a wolf in sheep's clothing. And the depth of it has just, I'll say, metastasized all over the United States, and it's
one of the things, Mark, you said about his business's practices, but he along with a million other people who are that rich, or how he can say how much money he has, they do the same practices, and we as a public allow it. We just never hold Warren Buffett to the fire. But I bet you if we dig into some of his stuff, there's probably times where he didn't pay his workers or the things he built at the time. He may pay them now, but I'm sure as he was coming through and up, a lot of those people renegade on a lot of payments. Mm-hmm. And so that's what you call businesses practices for certain people or certain white men. It's just been going on for decades, and it has never been called out by other white men. That seems like that's to be where the juggernaut is for me, because every time an African American calls it out, they always get dubbed the race card. Here you go again, complaining again. And okay, so now we have to figure out, we got to show facts, figures, and everything. Yeah, but you're just complaining because ... So when other people notice it outside of the minority race, say nothing, it becomes an okay practice. That is where we are in the system. We know we're in the system. We know what type of situation, but it's not enough of good people who say they're good, who say they're for equal opportunity and equal rights, who do not look like me, saying anything. Not enough of them is saying it. And that's where we are being held with our tails between our legs. And Mike Tabor is using words, I'm on the front lines. That's not a good thing to be saying. We should not have, this is not combat, but it is combat. Go ahead, Holly.
I'm kind of wondering how anyone would govern in Pennsylvania. And part of it is because I went to school with Tom Wolfe, who seemed in college to be a fine fellow. And let me just add, he had just come back from serving 2 years in India in the Peace Corps. I mean, how many people did that? But so I've kind of followed him.
You should explain who he is. A lot of people won't know.
I'm sorry, governor of Pennsylvania. And he, if I'm correct, if I remember correctly, he beat an incumbent Republican governor, right, to get there. And my heart went out to him when I saw a picture of him mocked in Hitler uniform. I mean, it makes me wonder how anyone could govern, but particularly how someone would govern effectively in an area that you're talking about. It just escapes me.
Well, in some ways, it's two different states. You've got the rural state. We're in the rural state. You won't see any Shapiro, the Democrat running for governor. You won't see any Shapiro signs. If there were any, they'd be thrown out. You'll see Mastrano signs. He won overwhelmingly here. You'll see a lot of Trump signs. My observation is the Democratic Party in rural Pennsylvania has given up. It has a horrible ground game. You won't see any, you only see Republican right-wing signs. And either they've conceded the areas in rural Pennsylvania or just assume the votes to govern are going to come from Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, maybe Chambersburg, York, Harrisburg. So it's really two different states. And
so Mike, you're kind of proving my point. When a person running for a particular seat who will not put a sign in an area, who does not publicly say anything, like I won't put my signs in Mickey Mouse County because they are XYZ. They won't say that publicly.
well, yes and no. Like we put signs at our mailboxes, but we're a half a mile back from the road. I've made it very clear. Actually, Fetterman is an incredible example of someone who looks like an oath keeper and is a very progressive candidate running for U.S. Senate. Will he get many votes here? I don't know. He comes from a very conservative area. I'd say the Democratic Party has written us off, not so much individuals, because I've tried. Well, Fetterman's come here, and he'll come again, but the ground game of Democrats is pretty bad. And individuals who put their signs up along the road just get them trashed. So,
believe it or not, you have elements of that in South County and Anne Arundel County as well.
In Montgomery County.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah. You could pick a county. It happens everywhere.
I mean, if you went by our house in Tacoma Park, you'd see, no one takes those signs down, but, you'd see two Mark Elridge signs, and you'd see Jamie signs, and you'd see all kinds of signs. And because it's Tacoma Park, there's not an issue. But here, this is Republican country. So the dominant signs you see here are, I guess I may as well say it, they're dominant signs, fuck Biden, and Biden's an idiot. Those signs are tolerated. So I did have a letter to the editor in the local paper, and I'm not going to read it, but a lot of people, and I said, these Democratic elections seem to be gone. You may as well put hate thy neighbor up.
I cannot hear anything you are saying.
I'm sorry, are other people having problems?
No.
I do hear you.
Will, do you want to bring up your volume?
Yeah, I hear him just fine.
Yeah, me too.
No, it's just one person. I did suggest people put up signs saying "Hate thy neighbor," and a lot of people commented that that was clever because that's the feeling. The Republicans and the Trump-influenced Republicans are not giving up. They're demonizing. They're pretty negative, and it's not old politics. It's invented politics, cultic politics, I would say. And another neighbor used the word Christian nationalism. He said you have to better understand Christian nationalism. And he was the newspaper editor, used that term. And I've thought about it, and I thought he had a point. What the
very good point. A very, very, very good point.
I asked him if he would write about it. He happens to be a liberal. I invited him to be on this program. Old family. See, we're not, none of us are old family. I think the point someone else made is correct. We happen to be here. I make a point. When I first came here, I volunteered as an EMT, as a firefighter. I got to know people. I was part of what I call the consciousness lowering group to get to know people. And, but if you're not a native going back 2, 3, 4 generations, you're never going to be accepted. And that's just what happens here. And people know if they tell a racist joke, I'll say, you better tell that joke without me here. It's usually not racist against blacks. It's usually about Slavs or, the old jokes. I find it odd, the racism. I do see Confederate flags. And when I've had some kids come up here, black kids, they said, why are there so many Confederate flags? And I said, well, even though this was an anti-slavery state, and in fact, early black communities established churches here and communities here in the 1800s, but then eventually moved to urban areas. And there was a black gynecologist who bought a house in the county seat, and for a while was able to make it, but I think he chose the wrong. They don't even get medical doctors here. They get doctors of osteopathy. You can't even attract an MD to poor counties like Fulton County. At best, you get doctors who are not what you'd see in the city. You'd see them in rural areas.
So I'm going to ask a collective question, and it could be for this time, it could be for the people, audience that's listening, it could be emailed in, it could be for however you want to answer this question. What do you think the solution is for us to unify as a community, or is it just for us to separate in different counties and say, you county can live over here and we county can live over here? I mean, what are some of the ideas of solutions? Because as it's going now, this isn't working. Let's go with that, right? This is not working. And the way it's continuing, it will not work. So what are some of the solutions? Do we just split up? We have us and them, whoever those us and whoever we them is? Or do we try? Because you cannot legalize or legislate morality, right? You can't legislate it, right? And you cannot produce it in the courts. So what are some of the solutions?
Some of the solutions, in my opinion, has to do with electing the right judges. Some of the and we can again bring attention to Mary Lynn Pierre, who's running for judge,
circuit court judge in Montgomery County.
Yes, for Montgomery County. The other thing is that you have to recognize that, and I hate to kind of point out partisanship, but Republicans have been going by the same playbook over and over and over again. It's getting tired. How many of you all remember how George Wallace split the vote in the 60s against Hubert Humphrey? And they just seize on that race ideology, racism ideology, and create a civil war to get everybody riled up and cause divisiveness. And it's done for the sole purpose of maintaining power. It's done for the sole purpose so that they win. And, they maintain their white superiority. So there's nothing new under the sun. They're not, they've got the same old game here. Try to divide with all this replacement theory garbage and all of this,
Claudia,
desire.
It is a fear for them. The replacement theory has been going around since the 70s. I remember reading books in the 80s about the replacement theory. So this is nothing new. It has always been a fear of the white males about not being able to sustain their race. It's been there. This is not something new. Go ahead, Howard.
The counter to that is really, So what if you don't maintain your race? We all live together in the same country, period.
Yeah.
On the same planet. So I mean, the world shouldn't end because of that.
Well, it does for some people. It really does for some people. They don't mind you working in the same career, but don't live in my neighborhood. Go ahead, Holly. I'm sorry.
But what is antithetical to people in your county, Mike, your area, to Josh Shapiro, just inherently?
Well,
other than he's not
I do
so
blame. Yeah, I do blame. I mean, how many people even know out there who Josh Shapiro is? Anybody outside of Holly and me? Anybody?
Oh yeah, I know who he is.
I do.
Yes, I know who he is.
A lot of the blame to me goes to the Democratic Party and a bad ground game and abandonment of rural areas and poor organizing. They've just written off rural America, and it's come true. What you've got here historically is an extension of what was called know-nothingism in the 1800s and nativism, which goes back even earlier. And so these are people that didn't used to vote, a lot of these people, and they've been energized by Trump and a Trump cult. I don't blame republicanism as much as I do this cult. And this cult is a MAGA cult. It's bring back an America that never existed.
Well, I tell you, I agree with you, Mike, and I think it's if you're going to blame the Democrat as a whole, maybe not slices and pieces of it, but as a whole, they have written off certain sections of communities throughout the United States purposely. They're like, oh, they won't show up. Oh, they don't matter. They have done that repeatedly through decades. So
in black rural communities too.
Absolutely. They have done that purposely. They're like, oh, they'll never come to the polls, or their percentages are so low, we won't ever send anyone there. They've done it. They've done it to places in the United States. Presidential elections, we know there's flyover country, terms used. There's different places in the United States that not one president candidate will ever land, period. Because they're the 3 or the 2 or the 5 electoral votes they get from there doesn't mean anything. As long as I win Pennsylvania, California, New York, Chicago. I can win, the 32 states. If I get those 32, I win, right? We could care less about what those other states could do. And that kind of goes us back to, go ahead.
But let me share with you that mentality, that defensive mentality of voters, see, that carries out in the administration, too.
It does.
That carries out in the people who are elected for office. They're very dismissive about minorities and their concerns. Look how the Police Accountability Board is being handled through the administration. If somebody asks for investigatory powers or subpoena powers, they rule that out of the bill.
They won't get it.
As though we're not there, we're not sitting there, we're not watching you. Of course we're watching you.
Look at the watered down bill he just signed today. The George Floyd bill. Have you read it? It's been so milquetoast watered out that some of these words, it's not even as strong as it was. Come on now. People got to read the stuff that he just signed, that he said he was going to sign when he went into office, and then now it's been so watered down, it doesn't even matter. We might as well go right back to the 14th Amendment, which we don't have anyway. Come on. People got to start understanding what's really going on.
Well, Mike, sorry about that. Sheldon has had a question in the chat for a really long time, and I've been waiting for a good moment to ask it for him since he gave me permission. Sheldon says, Mike, if the folks are good people, and then in parentheses, he says, unlike KKK, what can be done to loosen their link or hold that Trump seems to have over them?
Well, Trump speaks to them. He speaks to them. The Democrats don't speak for them. They're not even interested. That's generality, but
So what can we do, or
you can't
what,
do, sadly, you cannot do anything. I do know friends of mine, when they want to go, I feel personally we should be involved in local politics. That's my commitment for 20 years. That's my belief. And I've had people make fun of me. And they say, no, we're going to go volunteer in Virginia. Or we're going to volunteer in Reading. They live in Silver Spring or Bethesda or Tacoma Park. We're going to go to Allentown. And they go into primarily working class communities, but they don't pay any attention to what are the choices right now, for instance, for governor of Maryland. And how much do you really know about who's running and what kind of choice you're making? I'd say it's not there. It's just not there. Or school board. How many of you know the school board? 50% of your money, if you live in Maryland, goes to school board and education. How many of you have looked closely at who's running and on what basis? Or you've got 3 delegates and 1 senator. How much do you really know about them so that you're not just looking at the Washington Post?
Preach, Mike, preach! Look at that Jewish preacher. But you're so right on. I actually posted something said, "Re-elect no one if you can't tell me anything."
Well, people have heard me talk about this for a long time, and that's why I'm involved with Maryland. People are more concerned about what's going on in Virginia than what's going on in Montgomery County, and I've seen it here. I had one person yell at me, got up at a 40th anniversary of the Institute for Policy Studies, a left-wing think tank in Washington, started by Jamie Raskin's father, Marcus Raskin. She got up and she said, I'm in so-and-so in Montgomery County. I couldn't give a damn who's running for county council. I'm concerned with who's running for president, and period. And to me, that was really ugly that people really believe that and really believe sitting in Brooklyn, wearing my Brooklyn hat because I was born from Brooklyn. I'm not ashamed of it. But they really think they could influence what's going on in North Carolina. Good luck. Let's see how much you know about Montgomery County Council and David Blair versus Mark Elrich. And you're going to find a blank there, I'm afraid. And same thing with Maryland. How many people? I mean, we were somewhat successful. You got 235,000 votes, but you weren't recognized by the Democratic Party or the Washington Post or by, people.
Well, you raise a good point, because we should stop listening to these newspaper endorsements as gold. You search out candidates for yourself.
Yep.
But one of the other important things that you brought up is the fact that when you're voting for local people, I've had school board candidates come to my house and talk the talk. They're just talking things that you want to hear. But when it comes to votes, one of them, she shocked the daylights out of me, how she voted. It was awful. It was awful. I'm like, oh no, I will never vote for her again.
Well, I'm afraid we're in the minority. And I'm a little bit afraid also, Dr. Dyer, we've got dark times coming.
I agree.
And, unless, I'm a Bernie person. I think Bernie, until I went to a state college and they had to get rid of my Brooklyn accent so I could teach in school, and I had to take remedial English not to say things like in my ute. I had to get rid of that stuff. But Bernie is who I thought was speaking the truth. But I have to say, and maybe it's because I still have that working class, in my case, rural working class recognition, and I view the world somewhat differently because of that. I think Biden is doing the best he could. I really do. Not that he's doing enough necessarily for Black and Latino people, but within the confines of who he is, I mean, he's not going to get elected himself. He's my age. He's too old. But he's doing what he could do. And my big problem is the Democratic Party is just not together. And they haven't been since the 70s. It was back in the 70s that the fundamentalists sent organizers into the South to organize on abortion. And the liberals and the Democrats in particular just ignored that was happening and didn't care about the school board elections, didn't care about the delegates, didn't care about what was going on in the state houses. So some of my blame is to liberals and the Democrats and to a failure to focus on local politics.
We'll be cutting off here pretty soon. Does anyone have any other statement? We have about 2 minutes before we go off air, and we can stay on and have our own private conversations. But anyone have any comments, Marilyn, before we take off? Anything?
I just want to thank Mark. I just wanted to thank Mike and Charmaine for doing such an excellent job explaining this to us, because this is a very, very important topic, and I think that I learned a lot today. I want to say please come back next week, because we are going to have a discussion on the temporary protective status. And Sheldon agrees with me that this was an excellent discussion. Good. So please come next week. We could talk about that. We could talk about what it means and how it affects us. The young lady who is going to be our guest recently won a case involving the temporary protective status, and she will discuss that. So thank you.
Judge Barber?
Judge Barber?
I'm happy to be here again, and I thank you always for the invitation to participate in this program. It is very enlightening, and Mike Tabor and Charmaine, you have really educated us on rural areas and even rural politics greatly. So thank you.
I just want to say these neighbors, when I say they're decent people, sadly, the things get in the way of the decency, which we don't have time to get into. But they're not stupid people, and I don't think hatred is part of their ethic. I don't think they've been taught to hate, which is what I found in the South. I'll never forget the reception I got in the South in 1964. Those people were taught to hate.
So, Mike, you actually bring up a question. Does division equal hate? Because we know hate gives us division. Because not everyone that likes division is hateful. I agree. But there's still people that won't like me around, not because they hate me, it's because they just believe that we're divided. If that makes sense.
Well, then Charmaine's presence here shouldn't have been so well received. I
disagree with you on that, because I think Charmaine's presence here, I mean, as much as I love Charmaine, she's not an owner. I think if she were an owner, it would be a totally different reception for her. Exactly. And Teresa, do you want to say anything about
I want
that?
to say something about that as well.